Welcome to Fight News Now. I'm John Pollock, along with the voice of Prestige FC, which is coming up Saturday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Are you excited, John?
I am so excited. It's one of those things, getting the chance to call grassroots mixed martial arts where you know a number of fighters are destined for the big show. You get to see them before they make that leap. Charmaine Tweet, who faced Ronda Rousey in Cyborg, she's going to be on the card. The last time at Prestige, she was super destructive. Kurt Southern fighting for the 145-pound championship, and a number of bantamweight prospects. And Canada right now producing some of the best 125 and 135-pound fighters maybe in the game.
All right, John Ramdeen and Robin Black, Saturday night, calling Prestige FC. But we're chatting about what went down last week on Friday, because it kind of got lost in the chaos of UFC 196, but the UFC held their Unstoppable press conference, which we've seen now become their theme of bringing everybody together in Las Vegas and teeing up all the major fights for the next number of months, in this case being all the cards leading up to UFC 200. And we had a who's who in attendance in Las Vegas, and a distinctive tone on pretty well every single fighter that was asked a question, at least, because there were some who, Rory McDonald looked very sharp in his suit, but that was about it for his presence at
Him and
that
DJ
show.
both. They're just not smack talkers. It was just like when Rory McDonald and Robbie Lawler were the co-main event of that show that was supposed to be headlined by Conor and Jose Aldo the first time. They just got to sit back. They didn't have to talk smack at all because Conor did most of the talking, and they got to benefit from it because there were so many eyeballs on that. But Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier, they are not taking the Rory McDonald, Robbie Lawler route. They were in full force attacking each other. Jon Jones going at Daniel Cormier, and I think just kind of adding fuel to Cormier's fire, because he knows now what it's like to be in the cage with Jon Jones, to go the distance with this guy. Only he knows if he had done enough going into that fight, and having the luxury of training with Cain Velasquez and now the UFC middleweight champion Luke Rockhold, which will serve him very, very well. He's long and rangy and creative. On top of that, I know he was training with kickboxing star Rico Verhoeven, who is also a monster. So I think that Daniel Cormier is probably doing all the necessary things to make sure that he remains the UFC light heavyweight champion. I know it's going to be a hell of a fight, but I think the biggest surprise of that Unstoppable tour, the press conference, was the banter back and forth between Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold. This, to me, the rematch, just the idea of what we're going to see inside of the cage, very, very exciting.
I think in the case of both of those fights, they're very interesting on paper. Rematches that I think both serve a purpose at this point. I think there's no other fight you could make for that light heavyweight title than Jon Jones coming back and fighting for the title that he did not lose. You have a great hook in terms of Jon Jones' return, and I think you're right. I think the fact that so much time has passed since the last fight in January of last year, you would think on paper, well, of course, that's going to favor Jon Jones. He's the younger fighter. How much better is he? But I think with Daniel Cormier, had that rematch happened quickly after UFC 182, I think a lot of people would have seen a very similar fight. Instead, Daniel Cormier has had this time. Believe me, he's known since the time he beat Anthony Johnson, I know I'm going to be fighting Jon Jones. It might not be in my next fight because he got Alexander Gustafsson, but he knew Jon Jones was coming back, and that was the fight. So he's occupied his mind since 2014 when he was preparing for him the first time, and what adjustments he has to make in that fight. So I think that brings a different element to this, and it's going to be one of those cases, I feel, where the champion is the underdog going into this particular fight, but you would have to anticipate that when the opponent is Jon Jones.
Yeah, and again, I really believe there's got to be extra motivation over the next number of weeks for Daniel Cormier, because he was not received well at that press conference at all, and I think it really surprised him. And
Did you sense he was rattled?
I think he was rattled because, again, if you look at Daniel Cormier's past, you would be very surprised to think that people are going to support Jon Jones based on things that he's done in his past, where Daniel Cormier, he seems to be kind of the all-American, the captain of the Olympic wrestling team, family man. I know Jon Jones is a family man as well, but Daniel Cormier doesn't really fit the mold. You look at his body type is all about hard work and dedication, and we haven't heard that about Jon Jones. We heard that Jon Jones kind of half-asses it in the gym. Is that different? Maybe it is now, but we've heard Andrei Arlovsky, one of his training partners at Greg Jackson, say he doesn't always come around. Maybe he's doing other things, but when I go into the gym, Jon Jones isn't always there. Is that just because Jon Jones is naturally one of the most remarkable athletes ever in mixed martial arts? Maybe, but Daniel Cormier believes the way to beat that is through hard work, push through the fire, work harder than you've ever worked before, and now the bar is set because he did work as hard as he did and didn't get the win. Can he work even harder now to get that W upon Jon Jones' return?
I will say they announced, of course, we know what's happening at UFC 197 with those two light heavyweights. UFC 199 was announced for California, which is going to feature the Weidman-Rockhold rematch, as well as Dominic Cruz and Uriah Faber in a rematch. And kind of in the middle of there might be the most ambitious show in terms of just estimating how it's going to perform is UFC 198. This is going to be a 40,000-seat soccer stadium that they're going to be hosting Fabricio Werdum and Stipe Miocic, along with Jacare and Vitor Belfort. And again, Werdum and Miocic were there at the press conference, but I mean, they weren't two guys that are being focused upon, and yet that stadium, that is the most ambitious card that the UFC has run ever in Brazil.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense. You have all the biggest stars of Brazil, save for Anderson Silva. So it makes sense that they're going to have a show like this. Fabricio Werdum, you can make an argument that he's the greatest heavyweight of all time. Beat Minotauro Nogueira, beat Fedor, beat Cain Velasquez. The list of guys that he has defeated throughout his career, people don't want to say it for some strange reason, because I think when you think of the top heavyweights, this, for some reason, Werdum isn't the guy that pops to the top of your mind. But, you look impressive against Stipe Miocic, like you have in the past, during this stretch that he's had. I think a lot of people will give you the credit that you deserve. But, Vitor Belfort, one of the, the legends, not only in Brazilian mixed martial arts, but of all mixed martial arts.
I think he means the most to that market. With all due respect to Fabricio Werdum, I think if you're looking at who is going to be responsible for the most tickets being sold, I think it's a big UFC card, but Vitor Belfort, I think if he wasn't on that card, I don't know if they run a stadium.
Yeah, and that's why you load it. You have Werdum, you have Vitor, you have Jacare, you have Damian Maia, you have Little Nog on the card, and word is that Cyborg's going to be on the card as well, but who knows? I mean, they're making a bid. Apparently her team says, she's going to be a part of that card. She's already employed by Zuffa. Why not? It only makes sense. You're trying to sell as many tickets as humanly possible, and as you pointed, 40,000 is a lot of tickets that you got to sell.
Also, they have announced their return to Canada. It's going to be their first card in Canada since August of last year in Saskatchewan. This time they're going to Ottawa on June the 18th, and an awesome main event where you have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Rory McDonald. I would think, John, that this, you never say definitively when it comes to UFC title fights, but the winner of this fight has to be in a really good position for a title fight after this. I think many thought Thompson could have got it already.
Sure, but at the same time, we were just talking about Michael Bisping getting a crack at the middleweight championship, and if Luke Rockhold defeats Chris Weidman, do people really want to see Michael Bisping face off against Luke Rockhold, the guy that stopped him before, just like Rory McDonald? What, the third time? Robbie has 2 wins over Rory. Do they want to, would the UFC put Rory in that championship fight again? I can see them doing it as long as Robbie Lawler's not the champion.
It's an interesting predicament they have, because I think they're going to have a slew of possibilities when you throw in all the X factors at 170 pounds. And let's also quickly touch upon, we mentioned it already, Dominic Cruz and Uriah Faber, their third fight for the Bantamweight Championship. To me, this is a fight that I think that both guys understand that element of selling this fight as much as possible. They have the benefit of being on the same card as Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman. I mean, what do you think about this show? This is a month before UFC 200, and they've got to make this show feel very important, because I think by the time we get to June, there's going to be a lot of fans that are simply overlooking this card for whatever is ahead at 200.
Yeah, and I think the UFC has sent that message to the fans. I think this is, right now this is a hardcore fans matchup. The rematch between Luke Rockhold and casual fans. Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman, that is must-see for any MMA fan. You know what you saw the first time. Many people believe that it was Chris Weidman. He made a mistake. He went for that kick, and that was his undoing. Luke Rockhold was able to capitalize, and there was no looking back from there. People, what happens if Chris Weidman didn't make that mistake? Well, we'll get a chance to see that. 2 guys in their prime. Chris Weidman seems to have taken this loss very personally. He does not like Luke Rockhold, and Luke Rockhold responding well. I think we're going to see a lot of interest going into this fight, and then, kind of piggyback by, or it is piggybacking Dominic Cruz and Uriah Faber. And I love all the banter that went back and forth in that fight too, because Uriah Faber really getting amped up. He, based on the press conference, that you got a sense that he really did believe that he could beat Dominic Cruz, which is going to be a tough task. We've seen Dominic Cruz when he is on his A game. You saw that fight with Takeya Mizugaki. He smoked this guy. And then TJ Dillashaw, that's Dominic Cruz that hadn't been in action in a while. I know this fight with Uriah Faber still going to be down the road, but I expect Dominic Cruz to just keep getting better and better, and I think I would not be surprised to see this guy become one of the biggest stars in the game.
It was such a stacked lineup of fighters that they brought in. I mean, it was amazing that there you had Ben Rothwell, in a suit no less, and former heavyweight champion Junior Dos Santos, who were largely just there for photo ops. Demetrius Johnson and Henry Cejudo kind of overlooked during this press conference. I think it was more as much a testament to just how much star power they had and the fact
that... And the big fights. That's what it is. People say, oh my gosh, when is this fight happening? When is this fight happening? Tony Ferguson and the Eagle, he's returning. So I think all of this stuff is getting people anticipated. And it's like, okay, well, wait a second. I thought that fight was on this card. Oh, it's on that card. So it's giving people literally a reason to tune in to their next 5 or 6 shows.
All right. Those are the fights. Well, we are expecting to see over the next few months. You never know how injuries will play themselves out. But it is tentatively scheduled for next Thursday night. Our preview show, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, getting set for the UFC's return to Australia as Mark Hunt takes on Frank Mir, and the return of Hector Lombard as he meets Neil Magny.